everybody. Oh my gosh! This is so great.
I think you have a few fans here.
I love it. This is like a family reunion. This is great.
Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. This crowd started arriving at 5 p.m.
Wow.
And I think it tells you what
3
people 3 p.m. You know, so I think it tells you not only what many of us feel about our governor of Maryland, but also about the hope we can get from people who are in leadership positions and can teach us a few things. So that's why we're here tonight. My name's Lisa Muscatine. I'm co-owner of Politics and Prose, along with my husband, Brad Graham, who's right here, and our great staff who have worked so hard to help get this event and all of our events and all of our books and everything else in such great order as they always do. So I want to thank them. And I did want to give a brief history of the Teach-ins. So we started these Teach-ins in 2017 after the election of somebody. And we decided that our community would like and benefit from what we really borrowed from the 1960s. Some of you, not you, are old enough, like me, to remember teach-ins in the 1960s around the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War. And we thought, let's resurrect those. We'll have gatherings in which we have experts who can talk about issues and really help people manage and navigate difficult times. So we did several in 2017. And, well, someone got elected again. And that seemed to resurrect the idea in our minds. And we thought this time we may really need them even more. And so this is our third. The first one was on the rule of law. The second one was on free expression. And this one, as you know, is on the role of states in dealing with these very, very troubling times that we're in. And who better to guide us about what states are doing and how states are defending in this moment than our neighbor from D.C. Actually, he's my governor. But anyway, the governor of Maryland, who, you know, is really on the front lines every day. And as you know, Trump's regime, I think that's a proper word at this point, has eviscerated federal agencies. Lots and lots of federal workers have lost their jobs. We've seen cuts to funding that are very detrimental to many places, including and especially Maryland, and obviously draconian policies on immigration. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, and a few other things. I do want to mention how you and I first met.
Yes.
Because, right, we've known each other for a while.
For a while, since I was 21 years old.
21. So that was back in 2000?
That's right.
So this is what happened. So he was a senior at Johns Hopkins, and he applied for a Rhodes Scholarship. And I happened to be on the selection committee choosing Rhodes Scholars for the Mid-Atlantic area. And this guy made it through the first cuts, and then he was invited along with the finalists for an interview. And it's like an inquisition. It's a committee of about 7 or 8 people, and these poor 21-year-old seniors in college have to, you know, go in front of these people who are harassing them with questions. Well, I was prepared to be impressed because this guy was a double major in international relations and economics. He was an intern in Baltimore Mayor Kurt Schmoke's office. He was a varsity basketball and football player, and you're kind of getting the idea. So I was really prepared to be impressed, but, I forgot to mention, he had transferred after his sophomore year from a community college, Valley Forge Community College, into Johns Hopkins, big proponent of community colleges.
I love him.
And he ended up at Hopkins graduating Phi Beta Kappa. So I had good reason to know I was going to be impressed. But here's the thing. When he came for the interview, what impressed me most was not the stellar achievements. What impressed me most was obviously the big brain, but the big, gigantic heart. And also, I encountered something I quite honestly had never encountered before at 21 years old in this man. A transcendent energy and spirit that really was lighting up everywhere he went. And that was my introduction to Wes Moore. And I want to just say that the qualities that I saw in Wes Moore at 21 are the same qualities I see in him as my governor of Maryland. And I should add the same qualities that he has taken throughout his career, that have followed him into the military in Afghanistan, where he served in the Army, in finance, in business, where he also started his own nonprofit in Baltimore to help kids transition from high school to college, running the largest anti-poverty organization in the country, and then, of course, running for and being elected governor of Maryland. And he is now, as you know, or you may not know, but he is the 63rd chief executive of the state of Maryland. He is only, and I really want people to focus on this because this is a very sad fact to me, the third. We have 50 states and we've been around for like a couple hundred years. He is only the third Black governor in the history of this country. Now, that's just something that has to be improved upon. But in any case, you are a busy man. You are trying to protect your state against all kinds of things, which we'll talk about. And I just want to say we are so grateful and excited to have you here. We're so grateful that you would spend a few hours of what is undoubtedly very precious time to come to Politics in Prose and be here. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
I am. I'm so excited to be here and to have this conversation, and also I'm really excited to be with a group of people who, in this moment, you can do two things, right? You can either curl up into the fetal position, which honestly, if people right now, considering the everything going on, if that was a decision you make, I can't blame you. But then there's another decision: lean in. Lean in and fight. And I'm grateful to be with a group of people who are choosing to lean in and fight. And I'm so grateful to be with my dear friend, Alyssa. And she is right. I literally have known her since, again, 21 years old. And the reason that I'm so grateful for her is, as a person who was, yes, a finalist for a Rhodes Scholarship, but in many ways, a very improbable finalist for a Rhodes Scholarship. Someone who at that point at 21 years old, who was just, years away from being removed from being raised by an amazing mother, but who raised me as a single mother, who was an immigrant to this country and raised me as a single mother because my father died in front of me when I was young. That I was literally at that point a decade away from being a kid who had handcuffs on my wrist when I was 11 years old. And who joined the Army when I was 17. And then at that point was, after joining the Army at 17, having handcuffs on my wrist at 11, that just years later, I was sitting in front of a person who saw me and who believed in me and who advocated for me. And I'm very, very clear that the reason that I am here is because there were people who were willing to fight for the hope of me. And one of those people was Alyssa Muscantine. And so I'm deeply, deeply grateful for her.
Well, that was an easy thing on my part, let me just say, because I was not the only one who felt that way. But in any case, moving on. So I want to talk first about the states and the impact on states. And Maryland is so intertwined with the federal government. And I believe you have the highest percentage of federal workers of any state in the country.
Correct.
Obviously, we know what's happened to federal workers in the last 6 months, and it's only been 6 months, which is terrifying. And you rely, as governor, and the state relies on incredible amounts of funding for biomedical research, technology research, transportation, education, SNAP, all sorts of things. And I'm just wondering, what are the pressure points for you when you look at this whole cascade of things that are affecting your state, your budget, the people who live in Maryland? There are a lot of pressure points.
There are. I don't know if there's a state in this country that the past election in November was more consequential to than the state of Maryland. Since the Trump administration has come on board, Donald Trump has now fired over 13,000 federal workers. That is, and now those who live in the state of Maryland. That's the largest number of any state in this entire country. That since he has come on board, we all have seen how these random tariff policies have risen the prices on everything, from energy to electronics to clothes to food. We have seen how our institutions that he has placed under attack, institutions like the NIH, institutions like Social Security. There's one thing that a lot of those institutions have in common. They're all in Maryland. Maryland has over 260,000 federal employees in the state of Maryland. There's only over 160,000 federal slots and installations inside the state of Maryland. And that was very clear after he was elected, that my job and my priority was to fight for the people of my state, and that I would fight for the people of my state all over my state. And while I will work with anyone, I will bow down to no one. And I was clear. And I was clear that we were going to do anything and everything that we had to do to make sure that our state was protected. But from what we've seen from these first months, to include things like the arbitrary firing of so many federal workers, and again, when we're talking about our federal public servants, we're talking about people who do things like make sure that our food is safe. We're talking about people who do things like make sure that our air is clean, making sure that veterans who come home who are suffering from PTSD, that they're getting the medication that they need, like true public servants. And we are seeing that in addition to things like these arbitrary firings, in addition to the fact that when we had flooding in Western Maryland, and we were some of the first boots on ground in Western Maryland when they had historic flooding. And when we put in for federal disaster relief support, that we literally received a note coming back from the White House saying support from Maryland is not warranted. No explanation, but also didn't highlight the fact that not a single state that did not vote for Donald Trump has gotten a single cent of federal disaster relief support. So we're very clear about what this assault looks like. We're very clear that the partnership that we came to rely on between the federal government and our states, it's not that it's changed, it's that it's severed. So what we know is that means it's time for us to get creative. And so that's why I was proud that we became, when we started watching what was happening with these arbitrary firings of our federal workers, that Maryland became the first state that launched something called Feds to Eds, where if we knew we had shortages of educators inside of our classrooms, and I was like, if I got a person who's working at the NIH, who's a PhD in physics, and they say they want to be a physics teacher, I'm like, get them certified, get them trained, and get them into a classroom as quickly as possible so you can actually help to support. That we said, well, if we know we're losing supports when it comes to helping our young people, that we're watching cuts for gun violence prevention programs that were coming from the federal government coming down to the states, then we said, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to make sure we made historic investments in our local communities, historic investments in violent prevention efforts, and we have now seen how Maryland has had amongst the fastest drop in violence anywhere in the United States of America, that the last time the homicide rate was this low in Baltimore City, I literally was not born yet.
But now you might get investigated for those figures, right?
Now we'll get investigated. So yeah. But it really is. It's sad. It's sad because we are better than this. It's sad because the people of our jurisdictions deserve better than this. But the thing that I have promised the people of our state is that you're never going to steal our joy. You're never going to steal our happiness. People ask, how are you doing? And my answer is, I'm blessed and highly favored. Because I know right now we have seen challenging and difficult circumstances before as a state. We've seen challenging and difficult circumstances before as a country. I'm very clear. If you look at the flag for the state of Maryland, our flag is literally a combination of a Union flag and a Confederate flag. So Maryland has seen hard times before. All right? So the thing that I know is that the obligation that we have and that we made to the people of our state was not that we would lead in easy times, is we would lead in all times. And that's exactly what we plan on providing to the people of the state of Maryland to make sure they're going to be okay no matter the circumstance situation that we find ourselves in.
Well, you've had to be very creative. You've had to be very creative with a state budget that took a huge hit, but really that preceded you, but that you inherited. And I just going through the list of things, and everything from tax credits to earned income tax credit to help child poverty, which was of course a Clinton administration initiative back in the day, and middle class tax cuts, like you mentioned, record investments in law enforcement and public safety. You did the big pardon of cannabis. What explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so it was, when I was elected as governor, I ended up receiving, thanks to so many of you, more individual votes than anyone who'd ever run for governor in the history of the state of Maryland. However, one thing beat me on the ballot that year, and that was cannabis. So I'm like, yo, who is cannabis? And how are they so popular? But at the same time that I was elected governor, Maryland voted to have a recreational cannabis market. So I said, we're going to make sure that it is fair. We're going to make sure that it is smooth. We're going to make sure that it is safe. But also, I refuse to celebrate the benefits of legalization if we do not also address the consequences of criminalization. That we cannot have a new legal market that is now a billion-dollar market in the state of Maryland, but also have people who cannot get barber's licenses or cannot get a student loan because of a misdemeanor cannabis conviction from the 1990s. And so that's why, I proudly said we have to address it. So I signed the largest mass pardon in the history of the United States of America when, when I ended up pardoning over 175,000 misdemeanor cannabis convictions in the stroke of a pen. So I was proud to use my pardon powers for good.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, exactly. Model of pardoning. I'm just, again, looking at the priority list. It's triage, right? There's nutrition programs,
Right.
there are education things, transportation, veterans, housing, all these different initiatives. I know you've tried environmental things. You've sort of gone beyond the basics with service year. If you guys don't know about service year, it's amazing, right? Do some of you know about
Very
it?
proud.
High school graduates going into service at the behest of the state. You've done a Men and Boys project,
Yes.
which I think is cool.
Super
And then
exciting.
you've had crisis management. And talk about needing the federal government. Would the Key Bridge have been able to be restored in this administration?
No. Well, I think about how night and day this has been. One thing I have learned about this job is that when my phone rings in the middle of the night, I'm never about to get good news. Right? No one ever calls me at 3 a.m. and say, "Hey, Gov, great news." And on March 26th, a year and a half ago, I got one of those phone calls where I was awoken and they said that the Key Bridge had collapsed because a ship the size of 3 football fields had slammed into the Key Bridge. And it was at that morning, and as we first, put the state on the state of emergency, and you start learning what happened, I realized that we were hours away from thousands of Marylanders realizing that they no longer had a job. Hours away from Marylanders waking up and realizing that the Port of Baltimore, which is responsible for about 13% of Maryland's economy, was now shut down. Hours away from people realizing around 40,000 people crossed over that 2-mile-long bridge every single day to get to work, for them realizing the bridge was now in the bottom of the Patapsco River. And hours away from Maryland realizing that there were 6 construction workers who were fixing potholes while we all slept, who then fell over 180 feet into dark, frigid waters and lost their lives. And I'll never forget that as we were in the process of mobilizing our teams, getting divers in the water, and these remarkable men and women who immediately were in the water working to save lives, that some of the first phone calls that I got were from the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States. And I cannot tell you, as a governor, what that feels like. When you are dealing with one of the greatest tragedies in your state's history, and everything is moving fast. Hearing the phone call from the President of the United States and the Vice President saying, "We're going to be with you every step of the way," was powerful, and it was important. And I'm proud of the fact that, Maryland truly put on a case study on how to respond, where we were able to, return the bodies of the 6 individuals to their families to make sure they can get the proper closure that they needed, that we were able to make sure that our workers were taken care of and the small businesses. And when people said it was going to take 11 months to clear that federal channel, that in Maryland, we got it done in 11 weeks. But there's no way that we could have had the kind of response that we had if it were not for the responsiveness that we received from from President Biden and Vice President Harris. And so this matters. It matters to us as chief executives. It matters to us that we are able to have that real relationship with our federal partners. It matters to us that when we have our states that are dealing with a certain situation, whether it's a crisis or a tragedy, that we don't receive letters saying support for you is not warranted. It matters when you have, and again, it's wonderful being in Washington, D.C. It's not the hellscape that is being advertised by the President of the United States. It matters because partnership truly does produce progress, particularly in the business of policy making. And so that's why I think in many ways what we're seeing right now for so many of our nation's governors, and I was actually just selected by my peers as the new vice chair of the National Governors Association. So I'm the chair-elect of the National Governors Association.
Oh, whoa.
So thank you.
Congrats.
Thank you. And so I work with Democratic and Republican governors all over the country. And the thing that we all know, all public servants and all people who are fighting and working to protect your people, is when the relationship between our states and our federal government is so damaged, there are consequences to that we all end up having to work through and deal with.
Well, yeah, I mean, we should talk a little bit about what you were doing, but in the meantime, I think one example that's probably on everybody's mind is the sort of special case of immigration and deportation. You are the governor of the state where one of the first really awful cases of unfair, horrifying deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Maryland resident who was taken off to some crazy prison in El Salvador, right off the streets of Maryland. And he sort of became a poster child, but there have been so many, and we're all seeing videos now of people being rounded up and assaulted and with, by the way, I just want to say, when I think of the deep state, what I think of is people with masks on in camouflage, carrying rifles, rounding up people and assaulting them for no reason and then taking them to places where their families can't find them. That to me is the deep state. Anyway, I had to say that aside.
Right.
But there have been some interesting developments. Mayor Wu of Boston, I don't know if you saw this. Did you see what she did yesterday?
What she did yesterday?
Well, she got a letter from Pam Bondi demanding that Boston do all these things immediately, and they had to respond to the letter, and and they had to agree to this and agree to that. And Mayor Wu, who I don't know if many of you follow her, but you should. She's a really amazing young mayor. She just wrote back to Bondi and said, here's my response. Why don't you stop attacking cities that are doing great things and lowering crime to distract from your horribly failed and harsh policies that aren't working, and do what you should be doing. We're following the law, by the way. So it was a very muscular response. We had Governor Hochul the other day, I think, waived a deportation that she didn't think was fair, and Gavin Newsom's been dealing with the whole National Guard thing in California. So how do you see that, and how do you see your role in managing this particular, I call it gleeful cruelty of this administration? There's a kind of gleeful cruelty to everything, but especially the deportation and immigration harshness.
Yeah, and one is I think it's really important for all of us first to remember how unbelievably performative all of this is, because the truth is that if the president of the United States wanted to actually fix immigration in this country, he could do it tomorrow. Right? Because we all know, and collectively, and I tell you, this is a very personal issue. I come from an immigrant family, right? So it's a very personal issue. And we all know that there is a brokenness of the immigration system that has been around for a very long time inside the United States. So let's be clear that this is not something that President Biden did not break immigration in America. All All right, this has been a broken immigration system for a very long time, and we're all collectively of an understanding that the way we have to be able to address it is, yes, we have to make sure that the border is secured. We have to make sure that, yes, violent criminals are being removed from communities, and yes, we have to come up with a humane way for a pathway to citizenship for people who are inside the country. So this is a collective understanding that we all get. My point about the president is this, though. He could fix it tomorrow because he knows that the only way you actually fix the immigration system is you have to get Congress to pass a law, right? And he has not asked them to do this at all because he'll just rather weaponize the issue. If he called up the Speaker of the House tonight and said, Speaker Johnson, I need you to get me a comprehensive immigration bill to my desk next week. Do you know what will be on his desk next week? A comprehensive immigration bill, because Speaker Johnson does whatever the president asks him to do. Right? And so, but he's not. He would just rather weaponize the issue and then come up with various scapegoats as to why he's going to do things, many of which are actually against the law, in order to do it. And again, and there's actually a direct parallel even when we talk about, the quote unquote public safety issue, where again, I'm fascinated when he talks about how all these cities, including Baltimore, is so far gone. And I'm like, actually, it's interesting that since I have been the governor of Maryland, we have seen how the homicide rate across the state of Maryland is down over now 30%. Baltimore's year on year, as we're looking at violent crimes and homicide rate. The last time the homicide rate was this low, literally, was over 50 years ago. So I'm not sure what so far gone is supposed to mean. But when he talked about things like a mobilization of a National Guard, when he talked about doing things like utilizing state resources for it, I was very clear to the President of the United States, listen, my background is not as a politician. My background is a soldier. I know how to stand guard. And also I know the law and I know the Constitution. And I am very clear that before you even ask us, I will not authorize the usage of the Maryland National Guard for any mission that is either not mission aligned nor mission critical. I will not authorize it. Because he's not trying to solve a problem. This is performative. This is him trying to express power, and this is him trying to distract about the fact that we are talking about economic policies that have made everything more expensive on everybody. Economic policies that have basically said that we're going to cut healthcare from people so we can give millionaires and billionaires tax cuts. Economic policies that is putting the pain and putting the stretch on every single person inside this country. So the immigration challenge that we have as a country, it is a real one. And we have to be able to fix our immigration system inside of the United States. But we also have to say that we can fix an immigration system, but also making sure we're still respecting the Constitution and knowing that we have to abide by certain laws. And the way we are going to go about doing this is actually by coming up with a concrete way that achieves the three objectives we laid out, but not by doing performative stunts that is actually not intended to actually solve the problem in the first place.
Well, you might suggest that the National Guard that's being sent to D.C. from Louisiana and Alabama, I believe their rates of crime are much higher than Washington's just saying. So if you want to send the National Guard anywhere, maybe just keep them there.
And honestly, it's something that we're not trained for. And I said this to the president, listen, the only uniform the president has ever worn is a Brooks Brothers suit. So I said, as someone who's actually worn the uniform of this country, let me explain to you how this works. How this works is that we are trained to fight and win our nation's wars. That's how we were trained, right? Our National Guard are trained to make sure that we can actually address moments of crisis, moments of tragedy inside of our states under the jurisdiction and under the authority of the state's commander-in-chief, right? And I have had to activate members of the Maryland National Guard since I've been the governor, but it's also a duty that carries a significant amount of weight and soberness to it. Because I will not deploy these remarkable men and women for no reason, and definitely not for a publicity stunt. That when we are putting them in harm's way, that when we're putting them in harm's way, we have to understand the weight that decision should carry. And so this concept that we are going to put them out there to do municipal policing operations, which they are not trained for. No, my National Guard's not trained to do municipal policing. And he knows that. And that is what is so unbelievably damaging about this decision and this racket that is then that he's asking these men and women to do on behalf of quote unquote public safety.
No, it is very disturbing to say the least. And I want to move on because we would love to stay here all night, but we're not going to. The second thing category I wanted to talk to you about is the state of the Democratic Party and what's happening. I mean, you're now big guy in the NGA. Well, that's bipartisan. In any case, as you can tell, there's a lot of griping about the party lacking leadership and lacking a message. And we've heard lots of people propose different ideas and strategies. James Carville and AOC and Bernie and, Chuck Schumer, I guess, and Mamdani in New York has come up with his own, so far very effective a way to think about politics and governing. What can you do in this role? You're obviously involved at a high level in the NGA, which is not the DGA, but I know that you are close to many, many Democratic governors. There's an incredible roster of Democratic governors right now. So are you guys talking to each other? Should we be worried that there's not a more obvious thing happening that is kind of exciting people and making people feel like, oh, the Democrats, they have the answer and they're all organizing around it and here we go.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I've been thinking about this a lot where, and first let me just put it in context where I don't come from a political background. Right. I don't come from a party background. I don't come from a, political family. I see my Uncle Time and my Pam, my Aunt Helen, and I see, a whole bunch of my family here. But the truth is that we don't come from this hyper political background where I know, when I told members of my family that I was, I'm thinking about running for governor, there were members of my family I had to convince to vote for me. And it's not that we're not cool, we're cool. It's just I had to convince them to vote. So this is not and I remember when I was running for governor in the first place, and one of the reasons why I love Lisa so much, how helpful and supportive she was from Jump Street. But I was running against statewide elected officials. I was running against 2 Obama cabinet secretaries. I was running against the former head of the DNC, the former head of the Democratic Party. So I was not the party's choice.
And I just want to say he was polling at 1% when he started.
polling at 1%. I'm not voting was polling higher than Wes Moore. So it's a very humbling experience. But so I say that only to say that I wasn't the party's choice. And so what I did was I said, but I'm not running to be the party's choice. I'm running to be the people's choice. I was running to make sure that the people understood what we were trying to do and what we were trying to accomplish. That I was not going to get my talking points from a party leader. I was not going to ask permission from party leaders when I make my decisions. I was going to make decisions that I felt like were in the best interest of the people that asked me to represent them and always remember them when these decisions are being made. And so I think one of the really unique things about being a governor right now, and one of the most exciting things I think about being a governor, is I don't just have to tell you what the alternative should be. I can show you, right? I can show you what the alternative is. That when we are watching this massive assault that we're seeing on federal workers and employment from our federal government, I can show you what it looks like to actually have now over 4,000 new apprentices and trades inside of the state of Maryland, saying that we have some of the best four-year colleges inside of the country in the state of Maryland, but not every student needs to attend one of them in order to be economically successful and find pathways for them to get into the workforce. Right? I can show you what it looks like to make Maryland the first state in the country that now has a service year option for all of our high school graduates, giving them a chance to get into the workforce and find the things that makes their heartbeat a little bit faster. I can show you what it looks like to actually do things like the mass pardons and making sure we're giving people a second chance to get back into the workforce. And I can show you what it looks like to be a state that when I was first inaugurated, we were 43rd in the country in unemployment. Now we're going on a year and a half of amongst the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country. We have added more jobs since I've been the governor in just 2.5 years than my predecessor added in 8 years. Maryland's unemployment rate is 3.3%, about a full point lower than the national average. So as a governor, I can show you. And that is, I think, one of the powerful things that we have an opportunity to do right now as governors. Because nobody is looking at what's going on right now and thinks that this is okay. Donald Trump was an amazing vessel for the frustration. Because he's fantastic at telling you what's wrong with it and who's to blame for it. He's a master at it. Donald Trump is a vessel for the frustration. What he is not is a vehicle for the solution. And this becomes a unique opportunity for us to be the vehicle for the solutions. This becomes a chance for us to be able to move with a sense of speed and urgency that the people require. You know, I can go on all day about Donald Trump and the things that he does, but I will tell you this. One thing I do pay attention to is how fast he's moving. He's breaking stuff left and right every single day. And I think to myself, if Donald Trump can do so much bad in 6 months, why can't we do so much good in 6 months? That we have got to start being the party. We've got to stop being the party of no and slow and start being the party of yes and now. Deliver. If we can continue to fight, if we can continue to push back, if we can continue to show what an alternative looks like, if we can show that we can be a place that leads in faith and not fear, if we do that and we can show people what an alternative can look like, then that's why I am very clear. Then the idea of winning an election is not going to be the Democrats' problem. The idea of being able to win elections and keep the people, make that their problem. Because we can actually show people that an alternative, that a different way of governing, a different focus is actually the direction that the country wants and is actually the direction that the country is going to back up.
Do you think the country is hearing that now? I mean, as we were saying, they're incredible blue state governors, you know, and you included, obviously, that are doing really interesting things, trying to provide solutions, trying to deliver results. That's how you do it. That's the lesson. Yeah. He's obviously throwing roadblocks at every opportunity. Yeah. He's especially likes you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He's like, you're one of his favorites.
I'm one of his favorites.
Yeah. He especially likes the governor of Maryland. So you're constantly having to do this sort of dance around the landmines, but you're doing it, is what you're saying. Yeah. And so we've just went down the list of things that have been accomplished in Maryland. And you said you have to be creative. But you're optimistic that that will be enough to potentially get voters to realize these are the guys that are making my life better. These are the guys that are making my prices higher, that are, you know, rounding people up, you know, with no reason, with mass guns and so on and so forth.
And I think, but I think we've got to be out there making the case.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, that as Democrats, we're not just going to sit there and say the people will figure it out. No, they won't. You have got to be out there making the case. You've got to be out there showing up in communities and neighborhoods. You've got to make sure that you are going everywhere. You've got to make sure that people see what is happening and who is doing it to them. Because if we cede that ground, then yes, we will continue to lose elections. That we have got to focus on not just energizing the base, but we've got to focus on enlarging it. And I'll tell you a classic example. I was out when there were storms out in Western Maryland. By the way, the same place that Donald Trump denied any federal support to, I had to remind his administration, Allegheny and Garrett County, those are your folks. Those are the ones that you just said no to. The ones who literally voted for 77% for Donald Trump, right? But we were some of the first boots on ground. I remember the first time I went out there, I met a gentleman named Mayor Coburn, who has become a good friend. And he said, when I first met him, he said, Governor, do me a favor, turn 360 degrees. So I turned 360 degrees. And he said, the only guarantee I can give you is you ain't see a Democrat within 5 miles of anywhere you just look. And he said, but you know what? You're the first governor who's been here since 1996. The same folks who we were out there just 2 weeks ago when I went to church with Mayor Franklin, who's the mayor of Westernport, a Republican through and through. And sitting in church with her and then going around the neighborhood and the community and talking with the folks out there and hearing them say, Donald Trump forgot about us. But if we were not out there highlighting that, they would have missed the point. We have to go out there and make the case. We've got to show up. In communities that did not support Donald Trump who understand it, and in communities that did support Donald Trump who are now figuring it out, that he never had an interest in supporting you. That's not why he ran for office. When he was talking about retribution, he was talking about his own, not yours. And so we've got to be unafraid to go out there and make the case. Because I think people will see who really are the ones who are fighting for you, who are fighting to bring down costs, who are fighting to make sure you're protecting your jobs, who are fighting to make sure that you don't lose your health care, who are fighting to make sure that you have something to pass off to your children besides debt. Who's fighting for you and who's not? But we have got to be out there loud and proud, making the case unapologetically every single day in the work that we're doing.
Well, no, that's such a great answer. And I think you just answered an audience question that is really about sort of the message, I guess. It's someone said, Dear Governor Moore, what should Democrats campaign on to re-engage disillusioned voters within the party's base? And I think what you're saying is it's not an issue particular. It's not one issue.
No.
It's the concept. Is that right? I mean, and I guess the question also is, there's a lot of bubbling up. There are a lot of things happening. There are Tesla protests. There's No Kings protests. There's the federal courts are kind of a bulwark. There's some law firms that were courageous, a few universities. But the resistance is happening in pockets. Is that enough to then create a groundswell? Will something happen and that things coalesce? Or is the prescription that you're giving right now seems to be one that applies to almost everything?
Yeah, well,
certainly to governors.
No, absolutely. And one is, I think that all those things that we talked about, these are good things because I do not think there is one way to express your outrage. And I think there's going to be a danger for people who say, no, listen, the thing we should be doing is this, or the thing that we should be doing is that, because the truth is that might not be the way everybody wants to express themselves. And so if somebody thinks, just tell me it's binary, then the answer is either I'm doing your thing or I'm just sitting on the sidelines. No one can sit on the sidelines right now. Everybody has to find their own individual way to express where they are and what they are going to do. But I do think it's important that we also do this as so much of the reason that we are here right now when I talked about how Donald Trump is a great vessel for the frustration. We as Democrats can't forget why there was frustration in the first place. And we can't pretend that people were just hoodwinked. Donald Trump tapped into something. And we can't ignore that. And the frustration that so many people are feeling, it is real and frankly, it is justified. Where people felt like we were pouring into something and we were not being seen, or when we were being told that, you know what, it feels like prices are going up and I can't afford the same things in the grocery store as before. And then we were being hit with talk about inflation and stagflation. It's like, wait, you're not listening to me. Everything is more expensive. That when we're talking about, well, I don't feel like my children are getting the same opportunities that I sacrificed and I struggled and I saved for them to go to college, and they went to college and they did well, and now they're coming out having difficulty finding a job. And then we were being told, well, you have to understand the future of work and the evolution of technology. You're not listening to me. There is a frustration that people feel. And I think we have to be honest about that, and we have to acknowledge that. And the role of the Democratic Party is not to tell people don't believe what you are seeing with your own eyes. The role of the Democratic Party is to say that we can actually be the ones to understand, to hear, and then to move with aggression to provide the solution that helps to address your frustration and your pain. But it's not to tell you that what you're seeing is not true, or look at my macroeconomic numbers, because that is actually helping to fuel into the frustration that so many people feel. So the thing that I would say is that for everyone who wants to find their way of expression, wants to find their way of showing that they are not satisfied with what's happening, if your way of doing it is no King's protest, fantastic. If your way of doing that is to tell people stop buying Teslas, wonderful. If your way of doing that is say we're going to start a voter drive campaign, and I'm going to make sure that there is not a single person who I know who is not registered to vote and who's not going to show up next time we have to go into an election, that is wonderful. If your way of saying, you know what, I know there's a governor's race in New Jersey and Virginia right now, and I don't live in either one of those states, but you know what, let's pack up, let's go door knock inside of those states, then go do that. But do not just sit on the sidelines and think that your frustration is not being heard, because it is. Do not think that your voice does not matter, because it does. Because I believe with all of my heart that if we continue to keep this fight and keep this energy, that what we are seeing will be something that we will talk about in history books as a bad phase in this country, but not something that actually took this country down.
Here, hopefully, right. So kind of a related question, I guess. You mentioned that you started this race. You'd never run for office. You weren't even that political necessarily. I mentioned that you were polling at 1%. And that was a long campaign.
It was.
And I have to say, having been very involved with it from day one, pretty much, this guy was a happy warrior. I don't know how else to put it. It didn't seem like anything faced him. Running against the head of the Democratic Party, no, that's okay. Running against people who hold statewide office for 3, that's fine. And he was and remains, even in the face of all that is happening now, a happy warrior. And, so a question here that sort of dovetails the question I was going to ask you is, this is from somebody who's a Gen Zer. As a Gen Zer about to graduate from college, I'm genuinely scared for my future in this country with what this current administration is doing. What are things we can do to stay hopeful and not fall into despair while still being active in protecting our democracy? Also, hi. Very
Hi
sweet.
back. First, I want to say to whoever the question's from, I want to say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thanks for being in the fight. Thanks for your push. I can tell you right now, I would not be the governor of Maryland had it not be for a Gen Z. It was funny when we first were having, these events. It was amazing the average age of the people that were showing up, because it was all young. It was young people, and eventually, as I started watching, other folks showing up, it was amazing how many people were coming up to me and saying, like, I'm here because my daughter told me about you. Or I'm here because my nephew told me he saw you speak. Like, it was like the Gen Zers, young folks who like powered our campaign. We would not have won without them. And if you look at so many of the decisions that we have made, it's because they have been a core part of our entire movement, even throughout the entire 2.5 years of our administration. So I'm deeply, deeply grateful and always will be. The thing that I would say about how not to get disillusioned and frustrated, It actually goes back to something that I truly do lean on, and people say, like, how do you stay as a happy warrior in all this? Part of the honest answer is that first of all, I'm very deeply rooted in my faith, and I'm also very deeply rooted in history. And the thing I would ask people to do is this: is that in your toughest days, when I'm having some of my toughest days, I'm like, man, that did not go well, or whatever the case was, or here goes the president again, talk about me on television. I try to look at history. And even if you just look at history of my state, right, where sometimes people forget that, that Maryland is the northernmost southern state in the country. The bloodiest battles of the Civil War were fought in the state of Maryland. That we are the birthplace of Harriet Tubman. We're the birthplace of Frederick Douglass. We're the birthplace of Thurgood Marshall. And I love reading history because it adds a real sense of context. Where if you read history and you understand where we've come from, it's difficult to get disillusioned. Because I think to myself, and I have hypothetical conversations in my head. Like, imagine having a hypothetical conversation with Harriet Tubman and explaining to her how difficult my day was. You know what I mean? Like, oh, Miss Tubman, I got to tell you what happened to me today. And she's looking at me like, like, keep it in context. And there is no doubt that these are absolutely shifting winds all around us. And these are challenging times. And trust me, I mean, anybody who tells you, oh, this is not bad, I'm like, all right, okay. But the thing I keep on reminding myself is we've seen challenging times before, guys. We've seen tough. We've seen difficult. We've seen days that we weren't sure what tomorrow was going to be, but because of our will, we made it better than today. And so the thing that I would say to who wrote that great question is we need you. We need you to keep your head up. We need you to keep pushing. Because frankly, in easy time, no one remembers who was doing what in easy times, because that's forgettable. The people who you remember are the people who led during hard times. The people who you remember, that's what makes you legendary, are the ones who never quit and then ones who never flinched even when it was difficult. And so the thing that I would ask to the person who wrote that great question is, choose tough and go be a legend. Because frankly, that's exactly what our society needs from you right now. And you're going to be all right.
Here's a sort of adjacent question that I just want to ask you, because I think you've sort of answered it, but you might want to say more, which is from Janice Davis of Silver Spring. And she writes, what would you say to people who are scared or reluctant to step up as a leader in their community?
That's such a good question. How you doing, Janice?
And thank you for putting your name on it.
It's such a good question. I know sometimes it can feel difficult.
Wait, do you ever wake up and go, this job wasn't exactly what I signed up for after all?
Nah, honestly, it's even better. People said, what is it like being the governor right now? I have never been so locked in. I'm laser focused right now because I understand the assignment, right? So I am laser focused on what we have to do. I've never had more clarity. Because the thing that I always love, and Janice, you're one of these people where it's like, the people who I really respect is for people who, when everything gets loud, for them it gets quiet. When everything gets busy, for them it gets calm. And one thing I know is that this stuff does not come without the barbs or the attacks and all that kind of stuff. And I think all that is real. But don't let it rattle you or shake you, because bullies feed on that. That's like their oxygen. So I just deny it for them. And that makes them so mad. Where I really do try to live by this idea of don't let people that don't matter too much matter too much. They haven't earned that. And so will there be times when when you step up and you say something and there will be people who are like, I can't believe I can't believe that. Absolutely. Are there times when I just, you look up and, you finish something and someone's like, did you hear what the president just said about you? And I'm like, yeah, I heard. Or sometimes I'm like, no, I didn't. And I keep it moving because I will never, ever, ever give anybody that much power over me because they haven't earned it.
Thank you for that. That is so helpful, I think, to many of us. Just to, it's scary. It's scary out there. So having the courage to know you can't be given to a bully it's why the capitulation by some of these law firms
So
and
sad.
universities is so
So
discouraging and so upsetting.
So sad.
Okay, but this slight tack change, but basically same general subject. We are in a bookstore. And you are a best-selling author of 3 books. And by the way, the governor very nicely signed some copies of The Other Wes Moore that we have, if anybody needs a signed copy of The Other Wes Moore, which I'm sure many of you do, and his other books as well. So, but anyway, you're a best-selling author. You spend a lot of time reading. You've been in this bookstore. You're in this bookstore now. Is there a book you are currently reading or have recently read or have ever read that is salient at this moment in your thinking and feeling, that provides inspiration or hope or comfort or more clarity, context? Thank you, Jan. So that's my question.
There is. I love this place, by the way, and I love our bookstores, love our independent bookstores, I love learners. And there are quite a few that I think, both historically and recently, that have really touched me. But I want to give a shout out to Johnny Dorsey, who's our deputy chief of staff, who's standing right there, who's brilliant.
And very sweet.
And so sweet.
And
now he's blushing.
He's blushing. You got him.
Now he's blushing. And I don't have many like political role models or political people like I just love everything they really love what they stood for. But one of them happens to be actually the father of the first person that my wife worked for. She worked for Kathleen Kennedy Townsend when she was the lieutenant governor of the state of Maryland, and her father, Bobby Kennedy. And
the good one.
Yeah. Senior. And because I love how unapologetically he talked about things like poverty. Something that most people will tell you don't talk about. It doesn't poll well. I know there are people who told me that, and you know what? We said we were going to make Maryland a state that is going to end child poverty, and we've been focused on making Maryland a state that ends child poverty, because I do not understand how any civilized society can allow children to grow up in poverty the way that so many societies do, or a society that can call themselves civilized when you allow the fate of children to be decided before they even have a say. That is not a civilized society. But Johnny recommended a book to me that I read on a flight that I'd never read before or heard before, called The Last Campaign. And it's a brilliant book that talks about the Bobby Kennedy's last campaign. And the reason that book really resonates is if you think about what was happening when he ran his last campaign, where we had a nation that was being torn apart because of Vietnam. You had a president who had literally decided, I don't want to do the job anymore. I'm not running again. You had racial unrest that was taking place inside a community. Some of our heroes being gunned down in front of us. A real sense of fear and a cloud of apprehension about, is this American experiment going to work? Or have we hit its apex? And the person who, especially after his own life history, had every reason to say, I'm not doing this. A person who did not lose one but two brothers in acts of violence. A person who was a public servant, but frankly had enough resources that he could have just stepped away from it all. And a person who, as I found out in the book, his own wife was telling him, I don't want you to do this. This is a dangerous world. And he still ran. And he ran on principles. He ran on healing the country. He ran on ending child poverty. He stuck to his principles. And until his very last breath, he understood the assignment. And the book's really powerful because it goes back to, actually, I think, your really brilliant question. That none of us are promised easy. None of us are promised simple. None of us are promised that this is going to be a cakewalk. What we are promised is salvation. What we're promised is glory. As long as we stay true to who we are, and we never forget that we fight for our values with everything in us until the last breath. And that's glory. And that book was really, really powerful because it, again, it serves as a really important reminder that we have seen difficult before. And the only two things that have gotten us out of difficult before has been God's grace and steady leadership. That's it. And I just really believe that in this moment, what's going to get out of this moment? God's grace and steady leadership. And that's what I was reminded of in the last campaign.
Wow. Well, that's quite an answer. And we have some more questions. We're out of time, unfortunately. We could go on, obviously, as I said earlier, for hours and hours. But I just want to say that last answer really encapsulated the whole evening, at least for me, and really does explain what states and governors can do, what we all can do in our own ways. And I think Governor Moore has really given us a roadmap as individuals and as a country. And we are so grateful to you for your time and your wisdom and for being here with all of us and for really providing a ray of hope in a very dark time. And you always do, and we're so grateful. We're so thankful that you are willing to do this job. It is not easy. We know the costs.
Love you guys. Thank y'all. Thank you.
And
thank you, guys.
if you all could just let the governor leave before you get out of your seats too far, that would be great. But in the meantime, yes, please, let's give him a big laugh.